To understand the problems that the Common School movement wanted to address, let's look at the educational landscape of the 1830s. The system was very much one fractured by class and ethnicity, and one that differed dramatically across state lines. In New England, the puritanical tradition included a communitarian ideal of locally supported schools. Going back 200 years in Massachusetts, towns of a certain size were required to provide schooling, which was one of the reasons that Horace Mann had that option as he was growing up. But also, as Mann's biography suggests, many of these schools did not meet that regularly, and even those that did were financed through what were essentially user fees. Families could gain exemption by declaring their indigence, but many people chose to keep their kids out of school rather than suffer that social embarrassment. Other states had the opposite problem. In New York and Pennsylvania, the public school system grew out of charity schools that were designed for the poor, with much more select private academies for the well-off. The burgeoning Midwest was a messy patchwork, despite efforts to apportion land for schools that were part of the Northwest Ordinance. And in the South, the system was especially spotty, with assorted old field schools of dubious quality. The one-room schools, or open fields, across the nation weren't offering anything close to the differentiation of instruction by age and ability that we expect today. Toddlers sat in the same classroom as 18-year-olds. Most schools had a constantly rotating cast of teachers who were paid poorly, if they were even paid in cash rather than local produce or in lodging, and these teachers tended to rule with the rod. The middle class and wealthy could afford the academies that sprang up across the nation, segmenting education by class. To the education reformers like Horace Mann, this did not seem like an especially propitious way to raise the next generation of American citizens. Now, I don't want to paint the portrait too bleak of American education before the Common School movement. In fact, the reformers had a lot to work with. There was at least a legacy of attending school that, however spotty, touched most Americans, or at least those who were not enslaved. For another, literacy was relatively widespread compared to European countries. As early as 1800, over 90% of male New Englanders could likely read and write, and female education was a growing endeavor in the early republic. So the problem wasn't about convincing people that schooling was necessary or that the 3 R's of reading, writing, and arithmetic were important. The trick was in convincing them that they should get that education together. In the words of Horace Mann, common schools were designed so that they would be common in the highest sense, as the air and light are common, because they were not only the cheapest, but the best, not only accessible to all, but as a general rule, enjoyed by all. They would be uniform, offering roughly equivalent educations, whether one grew up in rural Massachusetts or urban Boston. And they would be tuition-free, supported by general tax revenue to encourage poor and rich alike to attend them. The emphasis was less on improving the curriculum, though there was some of that, than on making sure that education instilled moral virtues. As John Pierce of Michigan put it, "The child uneducated in knowledge and virtue is educated in the school of depravity." Making democracy function required a citizenry rooted in a common understanding of virtue and work. Now, a quick glance at the census of 1850 for the town of Charlestown, Massachusetts, should help us understand the social dynamics involved. Charlestown was an urban community in a country where the overwhelming majority of the population, more than 80%, still lived in the countryside. With a thriving Navy Yard, Charlestown had a booming population of people who came from Europe, Canada, and other states. There was work for the whole gamut of 19th century artisans and professionals. Clerks, engineers, milkmen, traders, carpenters, cabinet makers, teamsters, railroad conductors, tailors, printers, grocers, and plenty of work for the most common occupation of all, that of labor. And it was the ideal of common school reformers that all these people's children, male and female, native and immigrant, would attend the same school system. That would include Joseph and Thomas Cody, sons of an Irish blacksmith, Mary Sullivan, daughter of an illiterate Irish laborer, Emily Brunner, daughter of a Swiss mother and a German furrier. These kids would rub shoulders with the many children of grain dealer John Gary, born in Vermont, who owned $26,000 in property, and certainly would have belonged to the 1% of his day. But it was one thing to proclaim that common schools were necessary, and another to actually get everyone in the community to attend the same school. In Massachusetts, this was especially challenging, precisely because of the lead time that the state had in developing a competing but fragmented system of education. So how did they do it? How did they get everybody to buy in? That's what we'll take a look at next.